Welcome back to another lesson, Maka learners. In our previous lesson, you learned that seas and oceans occupy a big portion of our planet. That portion is called the Biosphere, or the part of the planet where life can be found. To be specific, water covers 75% of our planet. But did you know that only 2% of our planet is covered with fresh water? Fresh water is precious to human life, even if it has only 1% the salinity of our oceans and seas. Water is about 80% of our body weight, and this has to be fresh water. Without it, we would not survive. Most of the water we drink comes from bodies of fresh water. These are lakes, rivers, ponds, streams, and lagoons. Apart from having fresh water, these bodies of water are also grouped together because they share one other characteristic: being close to land masses that surround them. In this lesson, we will learn about freshwater ecosystems and understand the characteristics of freshwater ecosystems that make them special. Before we continue, let me ask you something. When was the last time you visited a lake or a river? What do you remember from the last body of fresh water you visited? Does it have waves like the ocean? Is it bigger than the sea? What do you think are the differences between them and oceans or seas? Outside of not being as salty as oceans and seas, bodies of fresh water are closely linked to where you find them. This makes it easy to tell them apart. There are 4 major bodies of fresh water: streams, rivers, ponds, and lakes. Streams and rivers are generally fast-flowing, which is why they are usually grouped together. Streams, however, are a bit narrower than rivers. Both are created from runoffs from mountains and other highlands. Rainwater travels downward due to gravity and collects in streams and rivers, which move quite fast as they make their way to the ocean. Because of this, streams and rivers usually have long and winding routes. One more difference between a stream and a river: streams can merge to form one big river. Ponds and lakes are also 2 similar bodies of water. These form when runoff water accumulates in a landlocked basin. Landlocked means there's no body of water close to something. This also means the water is not fast-flowing because it does not rush towards the sea. Both ponds and lakes contain standing water, though it is kept fresh by Mother Nature. Ponds are essentially smaller versions of lakes. One thing that binds all these bodies of water together, besides having fresh water, is life. These bodies of water are still teeming with life, hence the term freshwater ecosystem. There are, however, 2 types of freshwater ecosystems that we will talk about: the standing freshwater ecosystem and the running water ecosystem. Underwater creatures are fascinating. They are perfectly suited to whatever environment you find them in, whether it's salt water or, in this case, fresh water. This also makes them fairly sensitive. Freshwater fish like tilapia either find it hard to or simply will not survive in the sea. Most sharks, on the other hand, would die the moment you place them in rivers or lakes. Salmon spend most of their life in the sea, but when the time comes for them to reproduce, they make their way towards the river they were born in to lay their eggs. Those will eventually hatch, and the salmon fry or baby salmon will eventually find their way back to the ocean as they continue to grow. This is one way of adapting to your environment. Adaptations can be physical or behavioral. Physical adaptations involve changes in the shape of an animal's body to better suit the environment they live in. This ranges from features we can see on the outside to developing special body parts that will allow them to thrive in that environment. Behavioral adaptations refer to things like mating patterns, how animals reproduce, or feeding habits that suit the environment they are in. Standing water ecosystems like ponds and lakes have zones similar to marine ecosystems. They also house phytoplankton, which gives fish something to eat. A standing water ecosystem is divided into two, the upper photic zone and the lower aphotic zone. Just like the ocean, the farther the water is from land, the deeper it is. Shallower areas make it easy for these phytoplankton to perform photosynthesis because of the abundance of sunlight. It also makes these parts warmer. The closer you go to the center of the lake or a pond, the deeper and cooler the water gets because you expose less of the water to sunlight. If the lake is deep enough, you might find that you can see as well the deeper you go, much like the ocean. This affects what communities of plants and animals you see from the shore to the lake bed. Aquatic floaters, like phytoplankton and rooted plants, are usually found in the littoral zone, or the area that receives the most sunlight. The region also contains an abundance of algae, diatoms, snails, clams, fishes, and even insects. This makes this zone more diverse since it has a large number of different types of biotic components. The aphotic zone is very much capable of supporting life. However, unlike the littoral zone, most of the consumers in this zone feed off of the detritus or sediments, algae and rooted plants falling from the littoral zone. Smaller fish that venture into these waters also fall prey to the bigger fish. Flowing or running water ecosystems, on the other hand, are different. For one, they do not have distinct aphotic and photic areas. There's also a higher rate of churning of the sediments that fish and other creatures require for food, which means you cannot be as certain of what size or type of fish you will find in a certain area. Algae and rooted plants are still plentiful along the banks of streams and rivers. Phytoplankton also float and glide along rivers and streams, so there is no shortage of food for creatures that live near or in them. That was a quicker lesson, wasn't it? But hold on, we're still not yet done with aquatic ecosystems. Before we move on to the last one, let's look back at what we have learned this time around. There is a lot of life to be found in freshwater environments, even if it only makes up about 2% of the water available on Earth. The two major types of freshwater habitats are standing freshwater, like ponds and lakes, and flowing or running freshwater, like rivers and streams. Each ecosystem has its distinct characteristic and quality. There are two major zones in standing freshwater ecosystems. The upper photic zone is penetrated by sunlight. This is the shallower area of a pond or lake where photosynthesis takes place. This means more creatures can live in this region. The lower aphotic zone is found on the deeper end, where sediments or detritus from producers in the photic zone rain down. Running or flowing water ecosystems are quite unique because of how fast the environment within it changes. Despite this, life still thrives in rivers and streams. That's it for our lesson on freshwater ecosystems. Now, before you go, make sure you remember what we have been talking about so far because it will also matter when we start talking about man-made ecosystems. Before you go, do stick around for a short quiz or take the quizzes on your online LMS account. See you on our next episode, mga ka-learners!